The purpose of today's session is to help corporate explorers develop the strategy and structure through which they can act with partners to co-innovate and adopt an innovation to deliver a value proposition to the end consumer. Our guest today will describe 6 steps corporate explorers need to take to develop their ecosystem playbook. We'll then bring these steps to life by using the case study of the major US retailer, Best Buy. And if you like Best Buy, don't forget we had Hubert Joly on the show a few months, probably a year ago now, in an absolutely excellent episode on his book. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to thank the sponsor of the Corporate Explorer series, Wasoko. Wasoko helps large organizations create sustainable innovation ecosystems that accelerate efficiency gains and new value growth. It does this through intelligent enterprise software that connects and harnesses the power of employees, suppliers, startups, universities, and the unique Wasoko crowd of 700,000 global problem solvers. Wasoko calls this connected collective intelligence. And I'm so glad so many of you listeners to the Innovation Show have reached out and got in touch with Wasoko. And if you are interested in their tools, I'll connect you straight to the source, CEO Simon Hill. You can find Wasoko at www.wasoko.com. Speaking of ecosystems and connected collective intelligence, today's episode is called Ecosystems, Building an Ecosystem Playbook for Scaling a New Venture, and we are joined by the co-author of the Corporate Explorer Fieldbook, a colleague of Tushman, O'Reilly, Binns, and the whole 9 yards. Christine Griffin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aidan. I'm glad to be here today.
I thought we'd give an overview of this chapter, Christine, and give context to this case study of Best Buy, and then unpack those 6 steps. I'll tee you up here because you say Best Buy's footprint in home health expanded as a result of acquisitions like Great Call, Current Health, Biosensics, and others. But nevertheless, Best Buy rapidly realized that acquisitions were only one part of the story. Success could involve building partnerships with payers and providers, such as Anthem, Athena Health, and Geisinger. Let's share the 6 lessons derived from this Best Buy story and indeed the context that any corporate explorer can apply to increase the odds of success within an ecosystem.
Let me start with this story about Best Buy, and then we'll get into the steps. In 2018, Best Buy set its sights on the home health market. They wanted to provide home health to 5 million people within 5 years. Their plan was to deliver, install, and activate the technology that was needed to enable the care at home, and they realized that they couldn't do it alone. Healthcare is a really complex ecosystem. It has many providers, payers, regulators, suppliers of medical equipment, so pharmaceutical companies, and Best Buy knew that they couldn't do it alone. However, they decided that they wanted to create a footprint in this market. They did that initially through acquisitions. They purchased a company called Great Call, which sold the personal emergency response devices that they had in their store already. If you remember, there was a commercial in the US a while ago that said, they pushed the button on something they wore around their neck, and it said, "I've fallen and I can't get up," and help was dispatched. They also purchased a company called Critical Signals Technology, which was telehealth and medication management. And finally, another of their biggest acquisitions was Current Health, and that was a care-at-home technology platform. And so they established for themselves an initial footprint in this market. What they realized is that they needed to win the hearts and minds of the providers and of the payers in this system. And so when you talk to Deborah DeSanzo, who's the CEO of Best Buy Health, she'll tell you that they have carved out their specific role in this ecosystem, again, as someone who will deliver, install, and activate the technology needed to enable care at home. And Deborah says, boy, all this, the CIOs and the people at the payers and providers were very happy because they didn't have to have the headache of going into a customer's home and helping them install the technology and understand how to use it and help set it up. So they took that headache away from those providers and the payers in their ecosystem. And they also made it clear that they were not there to provide the care. And that would have been seen as like a competitive problem in the ecosystem. So what you've seen them do is identify what activities are going on in the market. They have identified the players in the market and the potential partners and the potential competitors in that market. And they have started to build this ecosystem play where the value is being delivered to all of the partners in the ecosystem, but also to that end consumer, which is the person who really desires to have care at home. And so what I'd like to do is talk you through some of the steps that you go through when you're trying to figure out what is this ecosystem that I'm operating in and how should I participate in the ecosystem.
Christina, I absolutely love the story of Best Buy Help. And it's a story many people don't know. When they think of Best Buy, they think of it as this big box retailer. But I absolutely love that story. I grabbed it from the library behind me, Hubert Joly's story. But this Heart of Business book talks about how he did it from a purpose perspective, creating purpose and really a heart inside the business. But you reminded me of a brilliant friend of the show, Charles Kahn. And Charles Kahn is speaking at our Reinvention Summit in 2025 as well. I cannot wait. Charles is also the chairman of Patagonia. And he wrote this book, The Imperfectionist, and he talks about this, how really clever companies, they don't just jump in, they take these steps, these clever steps into a new arena, just like Best Buy did. And he talks about Amazon. I just wanted to share, because I'll share the links to those two shows for people who are interested in this ecosystem building. Because this is becoming increasingly the role of the corporate explorer, to be the orchestrator of this as well. This chapter is so important for corporate explorers. Over to you, Christine. I'm going to share on screen the diagram where you bring us through the steps. And I'd love you to take us through the steps now through the lens of what you described with Best Buy.
So the very first step of mapping an ecosystem is to think about the value creation journey. What's going on for that consumer, that end user in the ecosystem? You'll see that you start with the innovation, right? And the innovation that Best Buy had in mind was this FDA-cleared care at home platform of products and services, both digital and physical. And what they wanted to do is help the end user connect effortlessly with the care team to recover safely at home and to have privacy. You know, this idea of healthcare information being electronically transferred is highly regulated and very important for privacy. And so this platform that Best Buy has is HIPAA certified. So in this first step, you map the value creation journey. So in each step, for example, you need to engage the person at home in the program. You need to help them install the solutions, to monitor what's going on in the home, to coordinate that care, and to provide insights and analytics. And so understanding the flow of, where do people find value in the exchange of care at home is the very first step. And so taking time to map that and understand it is pretty important. The next thing you want to do is think about, where are the breakpoints in this program? Where do users struggle? Where do providers of these services or suppliers struggle? For example, in the healthcare system, technology may be too complex. Maybe people are struggling to try to use a heart monitor or a blood pressure monitor at home. And they need help figuring out not only how do I install and use this, but how do I plug it into a place where the data can be reported remotely to other people? And, if you're coming home from a hospital into care at home, you're already in a pretty vulnerable state of mind. And so being able to identify the breakpoints in a system. And another one that happened for Best Buy is that urgent events need first responders to come. So when you press that personal alert that says, I've fallen and I can't get up, there needs to be somebody on the other end who says, okay, I'm coming, I'll be there in a minute. And so that idea of identifying breakpoint, that's really the first critical part of this thing.
It's so interesting how I know as myself as a corporate explorer, you're so eager to achieve something, to get going, to build this bias for action, that you often skip these steps. And they are absolutely crucial. They'll always come back and bite you in the ass if you skip these steps. And the other thing that dawned on me, I'm preparing a show for proximity with Kyan Krippendorf and Rob D. Walcott. And they talked about how many of these innovations, it's so difficult to get somebody to try it the first time. And sometimes you need the benefit of a crisis like the pandemic to get us to even use tools like Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And I'm using Squadcast here. Many, many people didn't use those tools until the crisis pushed them, and then they had no choice but to use that. And I think that's really interesting to realize, is there a break point there where people just won't, it's not good enough for them to have to change. So they'll just use a lesser version of what you have to offer. even if yours is way better. That these are things that you only really get to by mapping it out and going through these steps.
So the next thing to think about is who are the players who are participating in this ecosystem? And these are players who can get in your way. They could block the adoption of your innovation, or they can help, or they could be competitors. So you have to really think about who are the different players. And we identify these as a set of different classifications. So the customer is part of your ecosystem, the producer, so the people who are providing and supplying complementary product or channels. There's regulators that you have to think about, particularly in this example of healthcare. There are intermediaries who are people who are in between. So they could be someone who's selling your product. It could be a wholesaler or a distributor who is selling your product to someone. It could be an integrator. So somebody who puts all the pieces together to deliver some value to that end user. And it could be an orchestrator. And that is someone that a role that Best Buy talks about playing. You know, they have this platform, this digital HIPAA certified platform that they use that enables all of the participants to kind of come onto that platform and coordinate the care. Data is exchanged, services are exchanged. They have omni-channels. You can go to a store to buy some products. You can go online to buy products. So mapping the players, and then also understanding what is your interface, or what's the interface between those players. Are you selling through them? Are you selling with them? Are you co-innovating? In the case of Best Buy Health, they are working closely with Anthem, and they're working closely with Mass General to be sure to be able to deliver care in an integrated way. So they're co-innovating side by side. They worked through pilots, and then they ended up, scaling farther into the market. So this idea of really understanding who are the players, what role are they playing, and how are we interacting with them? And then here's the really important thing. Show me the money.
Oh, no, I was like, show me the money, Jerry Maguire. I'll show on the screen as well, Christine, because this, for those people watching us, you can, by the way, watch it now on YouTube, and Spotify have reached out to us on the Innovation Show to feature us as a video supplier, which is just absolutely fantastic. So I can share that on those people who are watching Spotify as well. Video is now available on Spotify. Christine will talk us through this. This is a brilliant diagram, so useful to be able to map where the value is in your ecosystem and where do you play and derive value.
So it's important to evaluate the different players, assess what is their motivation and why do they want to participate in this. And so if you look at this template, the ecosystem evaluation template that we use, you identify the player. Think about the capabilities. What are they doing that helps you deliver value to the end user in this ecosystem? And what are their incentives? If you think about some of the pieces of the Best Buy ecosystem, you think that there are payers who want to reduce the cost that's being incurred that they have to cover. If you think about the providers, they want compliance. They want compliance from different patients who are at home. They want compliance with the processes that they're trying to use or install. And so think about the incentives. And most often people want cost control. They want some kind of health quality. They want the quality of services. And they are getting paid for their against those dimensions. Sometimes there are players who the innovation poses a risk for them. Maybe it's not, in this case, well controlled. The quality is not well controlled, or maybe the innovation is going to compete directly with some of the services that players provide themselves. So they see the innovation as a risk. And you think about so where is money in this flow and how much is it? And one time I was mapping a system with a client, and they mapped the system and they said where they played. And then they realized that all the money was being made in the other part of the value chain. And they're like, well,
how do you know, isn't it? Because if you're, what would be the worst thing to happen? You don't do the work, you get there, and you realize, oh no, we've built this entire thing and there's no money here. And it all comes tumbling down for the corporate explorer. Maybe they'll be spectacularly jettisoned from the organization as a result of that. So this is the value of this. And I know also, again, Christine, I'm sure you see this, so many of us don't want to throw it away. We fall in love with our own ideas sometimes, and we don't want to go through this because we don't want to prove it wrong, but it is part of the process.
It is. Just to be careful and just think through all of these different parts before you jump head first. And another thing I'll make, another about the profit pool is that You can't have all the money for yourself. You need to be able to figure out how do you distribute value across the ecosystem and to motivate those partners to participate, to support the adoption of your innovation, and to share in the value being created for the end user ultimately. So after you figure out the money flow, you start to build your scaling path. And we talked in the beginning about deciding what your entry point is. And for Best Buy, it was this, personal emergency services. And they acquired that position. They acquired the technology, the call centers to support it. And they started to think about, now, what are the other capabilities that we need? Who are the customers that we need to serve? How can we broaden our reach beyond people who are just using these personal emergency services? And how can we capacity? They started with this acquisition having a certain number of call centers, and then they ended up building more of their own call centers in order to support network. But when you think about this, when you think about the idea of a scaling path, you're trying to start from what's the entry point? And what are the steps that we take? Aidan, I think you'll put out a path. The capacity is about this ability to manage volume. So it's around fulfillment, manufacturing, customer call centers, and customer service. The other thing to think about is what are the capabilities that you need to draw on? What are the technologies, the products, or the even business models that you need? Maybe you need to move from a fee-for-service subscription model. Or what different things that you need to be able to do. Really, like customers. Are your customers just the original end user? Are they the suppliers that are helping provide that service? And really thinking about how do you get access to more customers? And that's the fundamental steps of building a scaling path.
It's so important that, Christine, I was thinking about this, again, a great guest we've had, become a great friend, the guy Paul Nunez, I'm sure you know, he talked about that. When we talk about S-curves, most people think of the organization getting to the top of the S-curve as it no longer a need for their product or service, but actually so too does your capability. It starts to wane. And if you're going to jump to a new S-curve and create a new business, you will need new capabilities. And I say that to say, I'm sure you see this work with change logic, where when you're working with organizations, oftentimes you're hired by strategy or by innovation people within inside the organization. But I really truly believe L&D and HR, they need a seat at that table because they too will have to bring in new leadership programs and find budget to be able to train people in the new mindset. And also HR might realize, actually, you know what, we need to hire new people inside the organization. This is somewhere that's so often overlooked. And because of the siloed nature of large organizations, they overlook this such crucial step.
Yeah, it's important to think about the stakeholders from the very beginning and getting them involved, particularly around this step around scaling. So if you think about the 3 disciplines of innovation, and it is ideate, incubate, and scale. Scaling is one of the most overlooked disciplines in innovation. Everybody's all excited about ideation and incubating. They're so great, but part of it is preparing those stakeholders very early in the process to be able to understand what it's going to take to scale this, so that you don't want to show up, someday with a multi-billion-dollar request for investment. You want to hold their hand and bring them through the journey with you. And therefore, it's important to think about what your scaling path is from the very beginning. Have a hypothesis about where this might go. And it may be multiple different hypotheses that you have about how you're going to scale this business. And that can be, are you going to build some of these parts? Are you going to partner with other people? Are you going to buy it? And what are the customer's capabilities and capacities that you're going to need? So set that frame early on, and then you will give people a heart attack. And when you ask for money, because when you get to scaling, you're probably asking for a lot more money than you have in the past.
So your point, if I do that and I surprise people, or often what happens, as many corporate explorers know, is we'll blame the organization and go, those dinosaurs, they don't get it. And you're kind of going, no, but you had a lot to play in that. You didn't bring them on the journey. You didn't make them feel that it's their idea too. And I get that, because you want to take credit for these ideas because you get so little credit as a catalyst for change. Christine, fantastic job bringing us through the stages and indeed the case study of Best Buy. Again, I highly recommend it. They're behind me on the shelf. the Corporate Explorer Field Book, and indeed the first book, The Corporate Explorer. Absolutely brilliant read. Christine, for people who want to find you, find out more about your work, maybe lean into this area of expertise you have about building ecosystems, where's the best place to find you?
Best place is on ChangeLogic's website. You can do changelogic.com. And you can also reach me through LinkedIn. That's probably the best place, at Christine Griffin.
Before I finish, thanks again to our sponsor of the Corporate Explorer series, Wazuko. Recently, Wazuko acquired Inattentive, a company that I've studied for many, many years. They've also acquired Change in Colombia, Mindpool, Idea Drop, and most recently, Poster Lab. And Wazuko now offers a great idea ecosystem. You can find Wazuko on www.wazuko.com. It was a pleasure to join you today and host our guest, Christine Griffin. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It was great to be here.